Welcome to Season 4 of the Knack for Business podcast.
Before we get into today's conversation, Canada Growth Network. Here's the math. A full CRM, email marketing, funnels, and automations for less than a coffee a day. That's $47 a month Canadian with a $1 trial to start. If you're building a business and still duct taping tools together, check the link in the show notes.
Question to the audience. Why does your business run your life instead of giving you one? Our guest will unpack how overworked owner-operators can step out of daily chaos and into true ownership by building simple systems, shifting their mindset, and creating teams that run the business without constant supervision. Growth doesn't come at the cost of your personal life. Our guest today is Ral T. West, visionary business leader, systemization expert, best-selling author who draws on 4 decades of entrepreneurial experience to help overworked owner-operators become confident business owners with real freedom. Through her BOSS Mastermind, Business Owner Success Strategies, she shows founders how to stop trading their lives for their businesses by building systems that scale, teams that perform, and companies that don't depend on constant hustle. Ral has founded and sold multiple successful ventures, including an 8-figure Alaskan tourism business acquired by Alaska Airlines. She's also well respected both in the tourism and multifamily real estate sectors, a dynamic speaker and frequent podcast guest. Ral is also an author of Ral Stories to Anchor You Through Life's Storms, sharing hard-won lessons on leadership, resilience, and clarity. When she's not mentoring business owners or speaking, Ral lives in Alaska with her husband or somewhere in the world chasing their next adventure. Ral, it's an absolute pleasure having you here today. Do you have a favorite quote or saying, ma'am?
Gosh, well, I do. Great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people. Credit Steve Jobs for that.
And tagline-wise?
My tagline is, be your business's owner, not the operator.
So your focus on, people don't have to hustle to be successful. When did that magic epiphany land in your lap?
That landed in my lap when I was the one that was hustling. I was up to my eyeballs in running a business, growing a family, volunteer efforts, you name it. I was working around the clock and I didn't know which way was up. And our business was growing rapidly. My husband and I were running it together, but we couldn't keep up. Now we went, this has got to change. And particularly the moment when I hired a new reservations agent. We had basically what was an airline, but it was through chartering jets, not a scheduled service. And we grew so fast that we needed more reservations agents. And I hired one and I didn't have time to do anything other than just say, there's the phone, answer it, take a booking. And that was the training. And I'm like, okay, that sucks. That is just not going to fly. So we need to create some systems.
That was punny. I like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I do that a lot, actually. Like, the business really took off, that kind of thing. So yeah, that was a mistake of living it. Mm-hmm.
Why airlines? Most people go, I'm going to sell widgets, digits, snacks, and snarls, or whatever the case might be. But airlines, that's unique. I mean, that's may as well just give me a rocket to Mars.
Yeah, well, and of course, Warren Buffett says, don't do airlines. That's labor intensive, capital intensive. That's a horse business. But we actually, my husband loves to say, we're like, maybe the rare people that we've made money with airlines and cruise ships. Because after we sold our business, we got into buying cruise ships. So we made money with both of them. Crazy, I know. But we're opportunistic. And in the early 80s, I had a business in Anchorage, Alaska, where I was doing marketing consulting for tourism businesses because I'd grown up in a tourism business. My family owned an Alaska tourism business. So that was my bread and butter all through my growing up years. And I was, weaned on it. So I had some clients that were Hawaii travel companies and I was representing them to all the travel agents in Alaska. And so I had to fly off to Hawaii to learn about the products I was selling. And I met this guy across the hall in this office suite that I was in. And he's like, you're going to Hawaii again? I'd like to get in on that. And he was selling real estate. So he decided to kind of merge the two and started representing Alaskans who own condos in Hawaii. I'll be your sales rep and I'll rent the condos for you in exchange for a commission. So then I stepped in and said, well, that's fine, but you need to package it with rental cars and inter-island air. Of course, I represented an inter-island airline and a rental car company. So we created packages. Well, then, now we need to get the people to Hawaii. So we need to have a way to fly from Anchorage to Honolulu, which is called Trans-Pacific Air, or the Pacific. And in case you didn't know this, the length of the flight from Anchorage to Honolulu was about the same as from Seattle to Honolulu, San Francisco, or Los Angeles, about 5.5 hours. So it's just from Anchorage, you kind of fly straight south rather than west. So we figured out how to buy seats from scheduled carriers. And that worked really well until they pulled out of the market. And then we had a great little business going, but no way to get people to Hawaii. And so the business just, you know, fell like a rock. And I said, okay, what do we do now? Do we close the business? We didn't have any debt. It was started on a shoestring. So in case you hadn't guessed, that's the guy I married. Regress a little bit. 42 years ago. Yeah. And he's still around somewhere. Anyway, he found a plane that was being used on charters to Japan during the summer, Anchorage to Tokyo. And that plane, when it wasn't doing that charter, flew back to Honolulu empty. So he went to that airline and said, hey, we could fill that plane for you. You could fill those seats and make some money on it. And, I looked at your 10 Qs and you could use this extra boost to your revenue. And anyway, he convinced them. So we chartered this DC for a summer series. So whether 12 or 14 flights, I don't remember, but like once a week throughout the summer. And everybody thought we were crazy because it's summertime in Alaska. Alaskans don't go to Hawaii in the summer. And I just went, let me see. So I looked at all of my spreadsheets, analyzing the traffic that we had actually sold in previous summers. And I went, no, we have those numbers. We can do this because it's just once a week and the DC-8 only carries 200 something passengers. We can do this. We've got the numbers to prove it. Bet the farm on that charter. And by God, we sold every seat. So that's what gave us the confidence to continue chartering. And we became a scheduled charter airline.
Wow. But that's all. It just shows that you paid attention to one detail. You didn't know that it would have wheels up and in the air a moment, in your next business. But that is really it's fascinating.
Well, and all of these lessons that we learned during those early years those are the reasons why we became successful. And so in the last 3 years or so, I started another business. And that purpose of that business is to teach entrepreneurs the 6 principles that were the foundation of our success. And that's what I'm doing in this BOSS Mastermind that you mentioned. These are 6 principles that are timeless. Doesn't matter whether you're in the airline business or selling widgets. As you said, these principles will build a business that's rock solid and destined to have lasting success.
So I've been told that Maui and Hawaii are among the most beautiful places in the world. I have also been told that it's hard to stay connected with North American business in Hawaii. Do you find it hard being literally bipolar?
Okay, you weren't supposed to say that, like an island mentality. So sometimes you get island fever. And you know what? In Alaska, we live on an island as well. We live in Sitka, which is on Baranof Island, which is one of the 10 largest islands in the United States. And it's bigger than Maui, actually. But use a lot of communication systems. Thank God for the internet and Zoom and ways to stay in touch. So it's really not that hard. Get used to the fact that you don't get overnight FedEx. You have 2-day FedEx because it just takes a little bit longer, whether you're in Alaska or Hawaii. And, the Amazon packages don't arrive the next day. Maybe it's days or 2 weeks later. So those are some of the hardships. And of course, the cost of living is higher, both in Hawaii and Alaska, because everything has to be shipped in. But, we've got Costco here on Maui. We don't in Sitka. So we fly to Seattle regularly. That's only a couple hours away. So we do that. But yeah, there are some challenges, but you figure it out. We follow the humpback whales. They've been doing that for, gosh, thousands, if not millions of years. They've traveled between Alaska and Hawaii. So we do the same thing.
You mentioned
Okay.
your Boss Academy, and you have the 7 components to that. What's that all about?
Okay. Well, the Mastermind is a year-round program where there are twice monthly calls on Zoom, like for an hour. We go through the 6 principles, and I have guest speakers that come in and share about their expertise because, believe it or not, even though I've been around a really long time, I'm not an expert in everything. And the entrepreneurs, business owners in the Mastermind are learning how to get themselves out of that day-to-day grind and step back to be the owner and not the operator. And this is what my husband and I did. I mean, it took years for us to figure this out, but using the Boss Mastermind and my 6 principles, people can get that handled in a lot less time. Like, I bet they could get it in a year if they work at it. Not just going to happen by waving a magic wand. But the idea is that if you're in the throes of the day-to-day operation of your business, chances are you're the bottleneck to your business's growth. I know that's what we experienced. We couldn't scale the business until we learned how to use systems, how to empower our team, how to create a culture that really supported the team being able to make decisions on their own without us being there to, watch over their shoulder and tell them what to do. You can't grow the business if that's what has to happen. And if you're the one that's answering all the questions and being the problem solver, you're not going to grow your business. So joining Boss will help you to get out of that so you can actually grow and scale your business and have a life, because I just really don't believe that we need to be enslaved by our businesses. I think that most of us who are entrepreneurs decided, "Ooh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur because I want freedom and I want to do everything my way. And this sounds wonderful." And then you get into it and it's like, "Oh my God, this is horrible. This is like round the clock responsibility and exhaustion." That's not really what you want. I don't want it. And I'm trying to teach other entrepreneurs that they don't have to live that way. They just
A
don't.
lot of our listeners are basically in their hearts technicians. They learned a skill and started doing it for money, and boom, I'm in a business. But several years later, they're working in their business and not on their business. How do you
Correct.
help them transition?
Well, the first thing that they need to do is read the book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Exactly what we read that book in 1994. It was Robert Kiyosaki that recommended that book to us because he was our mentor. We were having lunch with him on the Big Island, and he said, "You got to get this book." And we picked it up that day and read it cover to cover and went, "Okay, this is what we're going to do with our business." So that was one of the impetuses for creating all the systems because he talked exactly about that. It's like you've got to whether you're a plumber or you're a baker or whatever your craft is, you start a business because I know how to do this really well. But that doesn't mean you know how to run a business. So you need to step back and learn, how to run a business. And that involves identifying the various roles that are required to run a business. There's the manager role, the marketing role, the finance role, the operations role, all of that. And then make sure that someone is what we call hatted or your manager hat on. And in a startup business, maybe the owner, the entrepreneur is wearing all the hats. Okay, well, that's fine to begin with, but you still have to really identify what those roles are and make sure that you're covering each of those roles and plan your time accordingly and orchestrate how you run your business so that each one of those roles is covered. And then as you grow, you start itemizing, if you will, what each of those roles requires, and then you can find somebody else to bring on your team, whether it's a contract worker, nowadays virtual assistants. They're wonderful. And okay, let's parse out this particular aspect of a to someone. You start delegating. And I hear many, many business owners say delegating doesn't work. I've tried it and it never works out. They do it wrong. And I just have to end up doing it myself. Yeah, you've heard that. I used to say that. What I learned was that there's an art to delegating. And if you practice the art correctly, you can delegate just about anything. The trick is to be very, very specific about what you want. What is the outcome that you're looking for? and a timeline for when it needs to be done. And then don't stop there. You actually also create feedback loops so that you tell yourself, you have to have a little system for yourself to set a little reminder in whatever software you're using to help you, manage your productivity. Say, all right, next week or the week after, I'm checking back with so and so to see how they're doing on that, and say, let me see your progress. What are you running into? Do you need any help? Or if they're off track and veering off to, somewhere else, you get them back on track. And that's what it takes to delegate properly and get the outcomes that you want. And that's where you can gradually build trust. Because a lot of entrepreneurs say, well, I can't have a team that does all this for me. I have to do it myself because I don't trust anybody else. You build trust one step at a time.
You found the micromanager when you found that person, right? That does that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Someone who's
it doesn't work.
only if it's you micromanaging yourself, and then only then.
Yeah.
You mentioned you have mentors, and who else was part of your mentoring? Like, who did you surround yourself with to keep things on track for yourself and your business?
Well, we had lots of mentors. The primary one was Robert Kiyosaki, particularly in the early days in the 80s and 90s. And this is before he wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, by the way. And we've studied with Tony Robbins a lot. And we, of course, read books, like I told you. We've taken courses. And we decided to bring on an advisory board to help us grow the business. So we identified 3 very top tier executives in Alaska business. We invited them to be on our board of directors. They didn't own shares, they didn't really have a vote, but they were advisors. And these 3 gentlemen, one was the CEO of the largest grocery store chain in Alaska. Another one had been a bank president and, very, very successful entrepreneur. And another one was very high up in the tourism industry in Alaska, had been president of the Alaska Visitors Association, et cetera. And these guys just were invaluable for guiding us and helping us make the big decisions.
So I'm struggling with first, I understand dopamine, but I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that their dream is to actually quit their job and move to Hawaii. You moved to Hawaii and didn't quit your job.
Well, we kind of did quit our jobs because 1999 was the year that we bought this house I'm in right now. And that was also the year that we hired a chief operating officer and a chief financial officer. Because by that time, we had set up the foundation. We had the systems, had the culture, we had the team, we had all of our reporting set up so that we could track what the company was doing daily, weekly, monthly from wherever we were in the world. And we said, okay, you guys, you can run it without us. And their big question to us when we hired them was, are you sure you're going to be able to let go? And then we bought the house in Maui and we said, see ya. That was their answer. That didn't mean we weren't present and, involved in the business, but we weren't there every day for sure. And we would have meetings. In those days, it was just telephone meetings, not video like this. And then we would have our meetings with our board of advisors, and we would travel to different places in the world to have those meetings, and the various department heads would make reports. So we kept our fingers on what was going on, like an orchestra leader, guide the orchestra. We weren't playing any of the instruments, but we were still making sure that the tune was being played properly.
I love that metaphor. You mentioned systems, and maybe some of them are enterprise, maybe some of them go all the way down to mom and pop. What systems do you find you've gravitated that you either built or bought that you use every day?
Well, just on a very, very basic level, I have one system that's an app that I use to juggle all of my tasks. We have several businesses going at any one time, and we travel a lot and have the 2 homes and a yacht, and people are always saying, how do you keep track of it all? And so, well, I've got a system. So this app has thousands of tasks that it records, and I set target dates for when this needs to be done or that needs to be done, and this needs to be followed up. And that's my guidepost every single day. I mean, I start my day with it, I end my day with it, and it helps me prioritize. And people like our bankers and CPAs and so forth say, you never let a ball drop. You're always following back up with us and checking on this project or that project. I say, that's because I have a system. Yeah, they're amazed by it. But so you got to start. there's a saying, you can't organize anything else before you organize yourself. So you've got to start by organizing yourself. So that's what I use this app for. It's called OmniFocus. And there are tons of apps just like it out there. So it doesn't have to be this one. Pick one that works for you and then stick with it and use it religiously. And it can help keep you organized. And then you go beyond that. The systems can be as simple as just having a list of processes and procedures that people need to follow. Whenever I have a fantastic VA and whenever we develop some new aspect to the business, it's like, okay, make sure that's recorded, make sure we have the SOPs. And if the SOPs change, make sure that they're updated. Those are all systems. And then you can go on beyond that. There was a point in our business where I think I mentioned that we took reservations by the phone and I, told that reservations agent, go answer the phone, take a booking. Well, when the business was growing rapidly, we couldn't keep reservations agents hired and trained fast enough. And our hold time was like an hour or more. And our customers were not happy with us. It's like, oh, we need to fix this. I was like, how many more reservations agents do we need to hire and how many hours can they be on call answering the phone? And we realized, you know what, we really need an automated reservation system that can be online. And this was the late 90s. There were no stores that we could go to and say, here, I'd like to buy that reservation system. Didn't exist. So we had to find a software engineering company who would build it for us. It took 2 years, 6 digits of cost to develop this beta. We said, we don't want to be the beta. Well, we were the beta. And as soon as we were able to flip the switch and start taking bookings online 24/7, whether we had anybody in the office or not, oh my God. Yeah, the business took off. Okay, another pun. It was amazing. Just, I don't have the numbers at my fingertips as to how it grew the business, but I'm sure fivefold, tenfold, just immediately. And we were able to eventually cut the reservation staff down from about 50 down to 20. So it was incredible. Grew to where we were doing 35,000 passengers a year between Alaska and Hawaii and, mid 8 digits in annual revenue. So that kind of system was a night and day difference for us.
Treating the art of delegation, and also maybe if you don't do it, you become the bottleneck. It means you have to change your mindset. You have to change how you perceive yourself. How do you convince someone to going, it's mine, to relax, share, let it run? How do you get them to get that head? Adjust the headspace. A little twist here, you were right as rain. How do you get them there?
That's a very good question, and it depends on the person as to how primed they are to make a mindset shift. Some people can do it quickly. Others, you really have to coax along and just do it. It's like, the old eat an elephant thing, just do it one little step at a time. So if you take these little bitty steps and let's start by delegating this little, and, you create a comfort level. And I think it also helps to get them focused on what they really want for their lives. What do you want your life to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Is this the way you want to be living in the future? And what would you like it to be like? And then, okay, if that's what you really want that freedom, and you want to go off and lay on the beach in Hawaii, this is what we have to do. And, get them to focus on that end objective, and that will help to shift the mind.
I understand that one of your KPIs, man, I hate that term, but anyway, one of your KPIs is actually customer delight. How does that shift? What does that mean? How do you know a customer is delighted?
Well, how often do they come back and buy from you again and again and again? I told you we had this airline was just Alaska to Hawaii. Well, the population of Alaska, I mean, right now it's like 750,000, but 20 years ago or so, it was, maybe it was around 500,000. It's like, well, how many times can you fill a plane? If you just go through the entire population, we had to have repeat business to keep those planes full. So we had to make sure that those customers were delighted. And we coined a phrase. I think we learned this from Robert Kiyosaki, that there's a thing called the valuable final product, and VFPs, the acronym for it. And so we identified that our valuable final product was a tan, happy passenger getting off the plane, back in Alaska saying, that was wonderful. I want to go back to Hawaii again, and, ready to book another trip right then. So that was our measure for, that's delighting a customer. And I mentioned that we had unhappy customers when they were on hold too long and so forth. And our customer feedback, which we did measure, that was, a metric, a KPI. And it's like, ooh, this is bad. We're not going to be able to stay in business long if we're not pleasing our customers. So we would really take extra effort to make sure that we were finding out how our customers were feeling about us. And then we would make the changes that they were suggesting, if this needed to be fixed or that needed to be fixed. It sent me to a hotel that just wasn't right for me. Like, oh, okay, well, then we need to do a better job of listening to what it is that you're really looking for your vacation. What kind of amenities, what kind of activities do you really want? And that's the kind of thing that makes sure that we're able to delight the customer. And the entire culture of the organization revolved around making our customers happy. And I don't know how to measure that other than you just instill it in every team member and you bring it up in every meeting. You just go there again and again and again.
You mentioned earlier that things changed, and that's why you had to go. You were looking at airlines, and then other things changed. And I'm sure the pandemic tripwired some other events, right? Because then, you can't really go anywhere, right? But each of these are seminal moments where it's like, oh my gosh, best laid plans of mice and men. What do you do when you hit that moment going, something not necessarily catastrophic, but there's been a shift where you would put footfall down normally? It's air now. How do you adapt?
Well, we had quite a few of those catastrophic moments in our business way, way earlier than the pandemic, even. One was 9/11, of course, where all planes were grounded and we had passengers stranded in Hawaii. But even before that, there was a time where one day we got a phone call and said the carrier that we were chartering from had been grounded by the FAA. Some inspector went in and said, and you're not flying anymore. And we're like, that requires being extremely flexible. Thank God we had a really great team by that time. And my husband was able to find a plane that could jump in. And of course, we had to pay through the nose for it. And we got those passengers taken care of. And it was all hands on deck. Everybody has to communicate with all these passengers. They're in Hawaii. They want to come back to Alaska. And then the people who are in Alaska wanting to go to Hawaii. I mean, it was a huge catastrophic situation. And then there was another tour company that had chartered with the same airline. They weren't as adept as we were at pivoting and being flexible enough to find the solution. So we took care of them as well, took care of their passengers. And so, that was, horrible. And then there was another situation where the airline that we were chartering with filed bankruptcy and they were still flying, but we were paying them in advance for these flights. And this was our customers' money that was now in their bank account. We didn't know what they were using it for. We figured they were using it for payroll and fuel and so forth. So what would be the guarantee be that when the time came to fly our flights, that they would still be operating, but they had our customers' money. So that was like, oh my God, this is not going to work. We asked them to put our money into an escrow account so that it would be safe. And they said, no, we can't do that. And we said, all right. So back to the drawing board again, flexibility, pivot. We found another airline, found another plane, and we replaced them. And it was huge upheaval in our office to make all these changes and to, move people from this plane over to this other plane. There's a different configuration aircraft and all of this. It was huge. But that's where the systems and the team come in very handy, because if we didn't have that, there's no way that John and I could have done all that by ourselves. Just never mind.
Meet everybody as they come to the plane. Yeah, window seat. No, center aisle seat.
Yeah. So, then when the pandemic came, we had actually already exited. We had sold to Alaska Airlines by then, running cruise ships. The cruise ships were grounded, basically tied up to a dock. And we just had one left at that point because we had sold most of them. But it became an asset that was worth less and less each day that sat at the dock. So that was another signal that, okay, it's time to pivot again. And so we sold that ship, lost some money on that sale, but then we went on and then we got into multifamily real estate, investing in syndications across the lower 48, invested in over 6,000 apartment units in the Sunbelt state. So that's what we're doing now.
I think I know an answer. And again, maybe dopamine's part of it. But some point along the way, you went from building to teaching, like with this mastermind. Tell me about that aha moment. When did you decide to teach it rather than build it?
That's another good question. I was actually learning how to make presentations to enroll investors in our real estate syndications. And one of my daughters said, Mom, real estate has kind of hit a rough patch with the interest rates doubling in a year. So why are you, doing all this, learning how to speak when that's not your audience anymore? Why don't you instead teach them about how you live the dream and how you're able to do all this and run your businesses? And I stopped and no, I don't think I want to do that. That become a personal brand. I don't know what that is. But not being one to ever shy away from a challenge, I said, okay. Yeah, I've always liked to teach. I mean, that was one of the roles I had in our business was, of course, training our staff and teaching them. And there was a time when we needed to teach everybody how to read financials because we wanted them to understand our KPIs. And they didn't understand what a P&L or a balance sheet was. So I taught them teach classes in our own business. So I said, okay, I can do this. So that was about 3 years ago, almost. And that's when I realized and looked back at our history of the 40-something years of being an entrepreneur and recognized that these 6 principles were what enabled us to have all of our success. And that's how I created my framework. I call it an organized to optimize framework. And now I teach.
What type of network do you have to have? Because you've described some things like airplanes to boats, right? Yeah, it's travel. I mean, you have the travel background, but now you're into commercial real estate or real estate platforms for residential. Those are kind of like, wow, it's kind of a skipping stone. Usually, someone who's in any of those given spaces tends not to be tends not to bounce over easily. What type of environment are you in that gives you that opportunity going, this isn't working out so well. Meanwhile, over there, it's a sweetheart opportunity. Is it something you're recognizing? Is it somebody that your mentor's talking about? Or is it just like, yeah, timing's good, drift and do?
Yeah. Well, continued to follow Robert Kiyosaki throughout, and he was always very keen on real estate. And towards it was like 2019, the pandemic hadn't happened yet. We're looking for other investment opportunities, alternative investments. One of the podcasts or something that he was on, I learned about this New Orleans Investment Conference, and it was in the fall of 2019. So we went to that and we met a bunch of people and learned about, investing in metals, gold and silver and art and real estate. There was just so many different kinds of like alternative investments. And we're like sponges when it comes to learning, just, soak it all up. What else is there that we can learn? And that's where we met some people that later joined their network and, hired them as a mentor, basically joined their mastermind and learned about multifamily investing. And they had what he calls it, multifamily millionaire multifamily mastermind. Well, I said, okay, we need to join that because if we're going to do this, we need to fast track it. So we need to jump all the way in and pay this, 5-figure amount every year to learn from the best, the people who were expert. So we knew that we didn't know anything about it. So we had to learn quickly. So you jump in and you hire mentors to get the fast track.
I'm fascinated, maybe even a little jealous, but something that sounds like you've been able to live the lifestyle of the almost a success magazine, not with pressure, but with this is what I want to do, so let's do it. It sounds like you've been able to teach the lifestyle as well as the business. Is that fair?
Yes. That's why the name of my business is Ral West, Living the Dream. Because, I mean, for years, our friends have said, you guys are living the dream. And I want to be like you. And can I, crawl into your suitcase when you're going off on this adventure or that adventure? We've been to all 7 continents and we love luxury cruising. And of course, we have our own yacht too, but that doesn't go very far, mostly in Alaska. And Yeah. So when my daughters were saying, Mom, everybody wants to be like you. Why don't you teach them? I'm like, okay, I didn't realize it was that hard to do what we're doing because it feels easy. And then they said, No, Mom, they don't know how to do what you do. Otherwise, they'd be doing it. So, yeah. So then I started to kind of chunk it down and say, Well, how is it that we are able to do this? And, created the framework that I mentioned. Yeah.
Any regrets of any of the businesses you picked? Not regrets per se, but kind of fun. No, let's not do that again.
Absolutely. There's some that was like, please, the albatross around my. We bought a motel and RV park in Anchorage because we loved real estate. We've actually invested in real estate since the mid 90s. And this was one of those, wild hairs that I had. You know, let's buy this property because it's just a beautiful piece of property. It has a great view. It's on a high traffic street. It's wonderful. It's a motel and an RV park. My uncle stayed there. Got to be good. Looked at the numbers and it all looked really good. But we bought in, yeah, it was like 22 right after the pandemic, or not the pandemic, 9/11. Sorry. Get these disasters mixed up. Realize and didn't do our homework enough was that there were a whole bunch of big box hotels coming into Anchorage immediately fall right after we bought this motel and RV park. And this 40-year-old motel just could not compete with these brand new, Hiltons and Sheratons and Marriotts and so forth. It's like, oh no. Deployed all of these principles, that the same way that we ran our other businesses and made a go of it. And and it was working really well in a lot of ways, but it just could never quite make enough money. And so we finally sold it and sold it at a loss. So that was a huge mistake. Yeah.
So show me the nuts and bolts. I understand that in Mastermind. I've even dealt a little bit with Napoleon Hill, going all back to, marketing the term. Tell us about the nuts and bolts of this mastermind.
Nuts and bolts of it. I mean, like how I get people enrolled in it or how it.
Any way you want. You're the one guesting.
Well, people join the mastermind for at least 12 months and they can renew for 12 months at a time, into the future. And the meetings will be an hour-long Zoom meeting, second and fourth Tuesdays of every month. And there's also an online platform where they can have access to my course. I created an 8-module online course covering all 6 principles, of course, and that's available to them. They have a resource library that I've created that is contacts and PDFs and ebooks and book recommendations and podcast recommendations for all the people that I have found through my networking. And they fill out worksheets because part of the course is each module has several video lessons. And at the end of every video lesson, there's a worksheet. So you fill out that worksheet and then submit it through the online platform to get some feedback. So the feedback is coming not only from me and my team, but also from all the other entrepreneurs. So there's really, some shared community experience there where, if somebody's having this XYZ problem, chances are somebody else is having a similar problem and they can, share perspectives and get some help from each other too. It's meant to be a community of entrepreneurs moving forward. So you get the foundation of the 6 principles. But then the thing with the 6 principles is that once you learn how to implement them, you're not done. It's not a set it and forget it thing. You have to keep going back and reassessing over and over again. And I recommend, at least twice a year, but preferably quarterly, revisiting, your systems, your leverage, your data tracking, your culture, your team, and your customer service, and figure out where do we need to make some tweaks? Where have we gotten a little bit off track? Where have things shifted? So we need to do more here than we were doing before. So it's an ongoing process. So I recommend that people stay in the mastermind long term because they will have guidance growing their business and making it a very sustainable, lasting success by being in the mastermind. My website is ralwest.com and there's a whole section for all the podcasts that I've been on. I've been on almost 6 dozen podcasts.
Wow. Congratulations.
See, one of my principles is leverage. So using other people's podcasts is leverage.
Absolutely.
Well, I think Bernie and I should be hosting from Maui. I think that's actually the piece of the puzzle we're missing, especially
right.
minus 20.
Okay. Well, yeah. Minus 20. That's Celsius though.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
It's still cold.
It's still cold. Yeah, well, we had a little bit of rain here today, but it's still like, 80.
That's enjoyable.
Yeah.
So, Rel, if someone is going, hey, you know what? I'm looking for the mastermind. I'm looking for the 6 principles. What are the next steps? What would you like to see them do? If they're listening to this podcast, they're going, yep, that's the ticket. I want to go there. Maybe she'll fly me there. Maybe she'll boat me there, or maybe I'll just be in one of her houses.
Yeah, yeah. The easiest thing to do, I think, is to, jump on a little call with me. You can do ralwest.com/let's talk, and you can have a short visit and see whether or not the Boss Mastermind might be good for you. Or you can actually go ahead and join the Boss waitlist, and that is like go.ralwest.com, and find out about it there. And also visit me on LinkedIn. And I have a weekly newsletter that's filled with tips every week about, what businesses can do to improve their systems and be a business that's more run by the owner rather than the operator. And I have a YouTube channel too. Lots of ways you can find me, find out about me. But again, if you want to have a quick call, ralwest.com/let's talk.
Ral, I want to say thank you so much for being our guest today. We really appreciate your time. To my co-host, Wayne Pratt, thank you for being the co-host. And more importantly, you, the Knack for Business listeners. Without you, what's the point, right? But here in this case, the point is, if you want to know how to run an airline, a cruise line, Ral will probably give you some tips and going, yeah, these are the things to stay away from, or the headaches you might run into. Or if you're interested in, buying real estate and leveraging real estate, or you're just trying to learn how to leverage. She's got a mastermind that's out there to help support you, and reach out to her.
Everything you heard today is for educational purposes only. It's not professional advice. Before you act on anything, talk to a certified expert in your area. Your accountant, your lawyer, someone who knows your situation. We share perspectives. You make the decisions. Want more? Head over to blog.knack4business.com, packed with practical episodes on AI, marketing, leadership, and growth. No fluff, just the good stuff. Subscribe while you're there. Until next time, keep building.